Imagine that you decide to start a new chapter of your life and you move to a new city. But once you get there, you find yourself in the capital city of an emerging dictatorship. That's exactly what happened to artist Richard Grune. Richard was born in August of 1903 in Flensburg, which was a small coastal town in northern Germany. Even as a young kid, Richard was interested in art. Fortunately, his parents also supported his creative endeavors and even sent him to an art college in the nearby town of Kiel. At the age of 19, Richard even studied at the world-famous Bauhaus Art and Design School. It wasn't long after that he premiered his first solo exhibit. Richard found it impossible to live as an openly gay man in the small conservative towns of his childhood. He wanted to find a place for himself in the world-famous, vibrant LGBTQ community that existed in Germany's capital. So in February of 1933, he packed up and moved to Berlin. Unfortunately, Adolf Hitler had been appointed as Chancellor of Germany mere weeks before Richard's arrival. Richard's parents were Social Democrats, and from a very young age they instilled in him the importance of the values of individual liberty. At the same time, the Nazis' campaign, propaganda, and rhetoric was becoming increasingly more and more homophobic. Both of these things probably motivated Richard to eventually take a stance against the Nazi regime. Soon after arriving in Berlin, he used his artistic talents to help design a series of anti-fascist pamphlets. By February and March of 1933, the Nazis had already begun closing the LGBTQ nightclubs, bars, cafes, and meeting places across the capital city. So this meant that a lot of queer people ended up having to meet at home or meet in more private spaces. Richard came from a relatively well-to-do family and had his own apartment in Berlin. So in the fall of 1934, he hosted a series of parties for his gay and lesbian friends. Now, according to all records that we have, they were really lively and festive parties, and everyone had a great time. But unfortunately, one of the attendees spent the parties taking down notes of the names, addresses, and even professions of everyone who was there. We don't know anything about her motivations, but unfortunately, she then turned in that list of names to the Gestapo. Between December 1st and December 5th of 1934, the Gestapo arrested Richard and 70 other men who had been at those parties. Richard was put in so-called protective custody for 5 months in prison, even before he ever got a trial. Eventually, a judge sentenced Richard to 15 months of prison time under paragraph 175, which was Germany's national law that criminalized so-called unnatural indecency between men. As soon as the regular police released Richard at the end of his prison sentence, the Nazi Gestapo apprehended him again. They put him back in protective custody and sent him to a concentration camp. They argued that by hosting these parties, he had seduced good German men into the lifestyle of homosexuality. Therefore, a normal prison sentence wasn't a strict enough punishment for him. In October of 1937, the Nazis sent Richard to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. A couple of years later, he was transferred to the Flossenbürg camp, which is where he stayed until he eventually escaped during liberation in April of 1945. In total, Richard spent nearly 10 years in different concentration camps and prisons. Richard later told someone that after I was liberated in 1945, I saw it as my duty to educate people about the concentration camps and the terror of the Third Reich. To do this, he created nearly 40 drawings and put them together into a traveling exhibit called The Pariahs. The exhibit premiered in Nuremberg in 1945. Unfortunately, much of the German public didn't want to confront the Nazis' crimes in any real detail. On top of that, social and institutional homophobia still existed and was widespread. For example, the American, French, and British forces allowed the Nazi version of paragraph 175 to remain in effect. That meant that homosexuality was still illegal. But Richard persisted and published his work as a portfolio in 1947. His exhibit and portfolio were some of the very first visual representations on this topic that were made available to the public. After the war, Richard also tried to be officially recognized as a victim of the Nazi regime. Being officially recognized would also make him eligible for legal aid and financial compensation that would help him rebuild his life. But the authorities rejected his application since he had been arrested and sent to the camps for being gay. The Germans continued to enforce the Nazi version of paragraph 175 long after the Nazis were defeated. In fact, in 1948, Richard Grune was arrested under paragraph 175 again. When he was released from prison, Richard moved to Barcelona, Spain, looking to start a new life. But financial hardships forced him to move back home in 1962. He passed away in Kiel in November of 1984. After the Holocaust, German society tried to silence Richard Grune from speaking about his experiences as a gay victim of Nazi persecution. But we commit to keeping his memory alive.